The defense area, otherwise known as California.
Yeah, right. There are currently 8,000 troops right now acting as law enforcement at the southern border.
Yeah, this is really crazy. I mean, so military troops have the ability to detain people who are inside national defense areas, because like that's what they do, right? If you go rolling up to a military base or a fort or something like that, there's MPs at the gate, and if you enter illegally, they can detain you. The significance of this policy memo is exactly what you're pointing to. They're saying, yeah, in addition to doing that, you can now pick them up outside that area on the assumption that they were going to trespass, or they maybe had already trespassed. It's a really significant expansion of their existing authority.
Yeah, with the good old, really, specific legal term, just outside an NDA.
Yeah, exactly. Just outside, a couple miles, whatever. Okay. In another story for this segment from Democracy Docket, we have the Trump administration plans to deploy approximately 1,000 Department of Justice election monitors across the country in November, Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon said on Monday. DOJ has not yet released its final list of jurisdictions where the monitors will be sent. Dillon said the department is considering jurisdictions with potential language or disability access problems, and also places where DOJ believes there might be voter fraud.
Ding, 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 ding.
There it is.
Yeah, if you think that Todd Blanche is sending out DOJ election monitors to ensure people are able to vote, I have a bridge to sell you.
Yeah.
But this is going to be Detroit, DeKalb County, Fulton County. This is going to be swing states where there are probably predominantly black voters.
Yep.
It'll be that kind of thing. So
100%.
Yeah, and there's also an interesting thing that I'm probably going to write up here in the near future, where, in order for ICE to deploy somewhere, they actually have to do some logistical things and file some publicly facing paperwork, like requests for quotes, like if they want to, have access to or rent a parking lot in a specific area.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some really amazing ICE watchers who are looking at these documents and noticing where they're at. And I think it's going to be interesting once that information comes out.
Excellent.
Next up from Reuters, the Justice Department has requested to interview FBI officials who were involved in the 2022 search of Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida as part of a probe examining past investigations of the president, according to 4 sources. Now, the request came from investigators working with Joe DeGeneva, a Trump ally who began overseeing the Florida-based investigation earlier this year. The investigation has been seeking to establish that Trump was the victim of a massive grand criminal conspiracy against his rights. This is the one where he really wants somebody to go down for Russia. So what they're trying to do, and they've shopped this to 4 different jurisdictions, and they've conveniently landed in Eileen Cannon's. What they're trying to do with the U.S. attorney down there, whose name is Quinones, I believe, is to, start with somebody like ex-CIA chief John Brennan and create some sort of massive conspiracy that also includes the 2022 Mar-a-Lago search. And the reason they're doing that, trying to rope that in, is so that the statute of limitations isn't an issue. Because if you're trying to criminally investigate a bunch of people for investigating you in 2016 and 2017, that 5-year statute of limitations has long since expired. So by trying to tie the Mar-a-Lago search into the grand conspiracy, they're hoping to overcome one of 1,000 problems with this investigation.
Yes, that is why it is called by case watchers and some case targets the grand conspiracy case. It's, of course, the one that I have received subpoenas in, so I do not discuss what's happening down there because it wouldn't be right for me to weigh in on it. But you are doing a fine job.
Thank you. And you were long gone by the time the Mar-a-Lago, by the time Merrick Garland forced the Mar-a-Lago search through some people who didn't necessarily want to do it. And it's interesting, they're interviewing FBI agents who executed that search because they when we covered this on the Jack podcast, when we, covered the investigations of former special counsel Jack Smith in the classified documents case, didn't do a very bang up job of searching Mar-a-Lago. They didn't open doors that were locked. They didn't bother,
Yeah.
They didn't wear their FBI windbreakers. They, gave a little bit of a warning to Trump's lawyers before they showed up to search the premises. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this, if anything.
And as we learned from Carol Lenig's book, the the absolute full-on knife fight that they had between the FBI and DOJ, the FBI dragging their feet and not dragging their feet, flat out refusing to actually pursue a search warrant and go down there and search the place. Of course, they ended up losing that fight. But yeah, really, really remarkable stories embedded in this whole thing. So we'll see where it ends up.
Yeah, and there's a ton we don't know about it because Merrick Garland was less than vocal about what he was doing, but he was the one who eventually forced that, right? Because he initially wanted to do it, but then some people at the FBI were like, well, just give him a subpoena. So they gave him a subpoena, and then they violated that subpoena, and then they had evidence that there were things that weren't subject to the subpoena that were still in the property, and that's when Merrick Garland's like, look, we can't wait anymore. We got to go down there. And the FBI's like, well, let's call him first and let's not wear jackets and let's not open locked closets. And
let's ask real nice and accept whatever they say.
Yeah. All right. So that is our rapid fire round of Department of Justice stories for the A block. We've got tons more to get to. We're going to talk about the Seashells case. I can't believe that's a sentence I'm saying with words. We'll talk about the Seashells case after this. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. As I said before the break, we have an update on the Jim Comey Seashells case for you. As you know, Jim Comey's legal team filed a bunch of pretrial motions back on July 28th, just like hundreds of pages of motions.
Yep.
A motion to dismiss the criminal case against him for, sharing a photo of seashells on a beach that spelled out 8647. Well, this week, the government filed their oppositions to those motions, so I thought we'd go over them one by one. First, Department of Justice filed a motion to oppose the disclosure of grand jury materials. As you know, this Justice Department has a pretty horrific track record of grand jury malfeasance, and in their motion, or in the opposition, I should say, they actually argue that there's a strong presumption of regularity here that cuts against releasing the grand jury material. It's a very fascinating argument, given the presumption of regularity has been completely decimated.
Yeah, that's rich. Okay, so Comey had cited his multiple motions to dismiss, including for vindictive and selective prosecution, back up the need for the Justice Department to either release the grand jury tapes and transcripts or to have the judge review them in camera, which is, of course, behind closed doors in chambers. But the DOJ argues that, quote, neither his vindictive and selective prosecution arguments nor his First Amendment or true threat defense that his Instagram post did not constitute a true threat provide sufficient basis to disclose the grand jury materials. In fact, the government maintains that 86 means, quote, to kill. But do they cite Merriam-Webster or the American Heritage Dictionary or the Oxford English Dictionary? No. They are citing, to substantiate this purported definition of 86, they are citing, and we're not kidding here, a Wikipedia reference to the second entry, not the first definition, but the second definition in Cassell's Dictionary of Slang. Yes, like
trusted legal source,
like Black's Law Dictionary, or Gross Anatomy, all the tomes of academia that are widely accepted in courts around the globe. There is always Cassell's Dictionary of Slang.
Yeah, and what's funny too is elsewhere in the filing and others, DOJ refutes Comey's motion to dismiss on vindictive prosecution grounds because it doesn't meet the actual malice standard, but actual malice is a defamation standard, not a vindictive prosecution standard. So I don't know why they're using actual malice. Regardless, they conclude, quote, the court should deny Comey's motion for disclosure of grand jury proceedings or, in the alternative, limit any relief to an in-camera review and further restrict any publication of any grand jury information if it's shared with the defendant. Respectfully submitted this 18th day of August, 2026.
Yeah, I think the standard is actual vindictiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to show objective evidence to prove that you've been charged for some vindictive purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Yikes.
It reminds me of the Alice's Restaurant song. Malice, who the fuck is Malice? Like, why are you bringing up actual malice in a vindictive case? Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Next is the government's opposition to Comey's motion to dismiss on vindictive and selective prosecution grounds. And this is wild. So Comey has pointed out that countless people have used the term 86 and have not been prosecuted. Now, DOJ says, quote, Comey's selective prosecution claim fails for largely the same reasons, and because Comey cannot show that others similarly situated were not prosecuted. So hold on a second. But he did show that countless people have used the same thing and not got prosecuted. Okay, whatever. Whether or not a statement is a true threat depends heavily on context. And here the context is unique. Among other reasons, at nearly the same time as the post in question, Comey published a novel where the antagonist successfully persuades his followers to kill his political rivals by communicating coded messages online. Needless to say, Comey does not and could not point to similar evidence in any comparator case, let alone a threat against the sitting president of the United States. So hold on a second.
He wrote a fiction book about a...
We're trying to establish what this slang term means and what Comey meant by it when he used the number 86 in his display of shells, or saw one that was already on the beach and took a picture of it, whatever. And he points out that like many people said, whatever, 86 Biden, 86 whoever, thousands of times publicly on social media and didn't get prosecuted. And that's not good enough for them. But they're going to go to this, but he wrote a book, which is fiction, about a guy who posted a message and convinced people to kill someone. And that's somehow a compare. That's the context that's so unique. This can't possibly be vindictive.
Well, Andy, the second entry in Cassell's Dictionary of Slang clearly says.
I mean, oh my God.
Yeah. All right. Then DOJ brings up the actual malice standard again, which that's not a standard for vindictive or selective prosecution. But in that section, the government says this: although Comey has cobbled together a 77-page collection of every public statement Trump has ever made regarding Comey spanning back nearly a decade, those statements are irrelevant to the analysis. Even if they weren't, they don't show the sort of animus that's legally relevant here. He's got 77 pages of animus. And they're like, that's not legally relevant.
Some cobbled together gobbledygook. I mean, 77 pages of actual vindictiveness.
Mm-hmm.
He's a dirty cop. He should go to jail. We're going to put him in jail. He's a dirty cop. I mean, how could that be there's no way that's not relevant.
Yeah.
What could be more relevant than that?
Right. Now, next is the Justice Department's opposition to Comey's motion to dismiss for what's called lack of a true threat. Here, the DOJ argues this way: the court can easily deny defendant James B. Comey Jr.'s motion to dismiss for purported lack of a true threat. Easily deny it. At this stage, the issue presented is not whether Comey's 8647 post constituted a true threat against the president, though the United States maintains that it did. Rather, the issue presented is who should answer the true threats question in the first instance. Now, Comey seeks to take that question away from the jury before the government presents any evidence or even allegations setting forth its theory of the case, given the conventional short form indictment. No authority supports his attempt to shortcut these proceedings.
Yeah, I mean, what what he's alleging is a violation of his constitutional right, his First Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. And judges assess constitutional violations all the time at the beginning of a case, right? It'd be the same thing as if you made a motion that you were illegally searched.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't have to go to the jury.
Right. A judge can dismiss a case if it fails to state an offense or as a matter of law if the indictment doesn't meet the elements of the crime. That's a matter of law. That's a judge matter, not a jury matter.
Exactly.
So DOJ is just wrong here.
Yeah. So next, the government filed an opposition to Comey's motion to suppress evidence and motion for what's called a Franks hearing. A Franks hearing is a court proceeding where a judge decides if a police officer lied or acted recklessly to get a search warrant. It's named after the Supreme Court case Franks versus Delaware. And basically, it lets a defense lawyer challenge the truth of the police paperwork used to search a home or a person. Now, a trial court is obligated to conduct a Franks hearing only if the defendant makes a preliminary showing that, one, the affiant knowingly and intentionally, or with reckless disregard for the truth, included a false statement in the warrant affidavit, and two, that the allegedly false statement was necessary to a finding of probable cause.
Right. I'm thinking of that old FISA warrant where everybody on the right freaked out that Chris Steele's dossier was part of it, but it was like a 1,000-page thing, and it was determined that the FISA warrant would have been approved without it. But in certain cases here, like a search warrant, if you've got a police officer lying about like, oh, well, that guy who owns that house is a drug dealer, and they're not, and that's like one of the main reasons you're going in there, then you need a Franks hearing to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Or if you're just like, oh yeah, we're looking for this guy and he lives in this house, but you never really do any surveillance. You don't ever put him in the house. You don't ever confirm that he actually lives there. It turns out he sold the house to someone else and someone else lives there. Then you went in and made your entry and somebody got hurt. Like that would be recklessly disregarding the truth. Yeah. You included something that wasn't true because you were reckless.
And by the way, there was never a Franks hearing for the search in Mar-a-Lago. Now, you'll recall Comey filed that motion for a Franks hearing because he's alleging that the agents who applied for the warrants against him actually misled the magistrate judges, as to the fundamental facts of the case, including that Comey knew 86 meant to kill because he prosecuted mob cases and the mob uses 86 to mean kill. So, quote, here's something from Comey's initial motion for a Franks hearing. He says, the government spent months poring over records of Mr. Comey's government service and interviewing people who worked on organized crime cases more than 30 years ago. Those efforts, which preceded the government's applications for these warrants, failed to find any evidence proving that Comey learned that 86 means kill in the organized crime context, because it does not. And this is also something that goes toward getting the grand jury materials. What on earth did you tell the grand jury?
Yeah, it makes that motion supremely important here. He wants to see, his team wants to see what sort of statements and testimony were provided to the grand jury, because it could back up this allegation that agents who did all this work, who looked at all of the transcripts from all of his cases and ran all these searches through their own computer systems and never came up with a single instance that put Jim Comey and a mobster's use of the number 86 as slang for killing. They didn't come up with anything about that. But yet they must have gone in and said something to the grand jury or to the judge to get the search warrant that indicated that in fact had happened or was true.
Yeah. In fact, I think there's a witness that Comey brings up, witness 4, who apparently told the grand jury, Comey totally knew 86 meant to kill, but like based on nothing. And so not only does that go to a Franks hearing, but it also goes to getting the grand jury materials.
Right. So the government's opposition to Comey's motion for the Franks hearing says, quote, the government simply presented facts and some, quote, rational investigative deductions to the magistrate, who was free to accept or reject any interpretation as probative. The agent did not say anything untrue or inaccurately mislead the magistrate. That's not true, according to what he's stating in his motion. Like, if you made that comment after you'd done all this research and found no evidence of it, then, you aren't just, that's not a rational investigative deduction to continue to conclude the same thing, even after you've gone out and done all this work and found no evidence of that whatsoever.
Right. And so I think there's plenty of reason at least to look at it in camera, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that opens the can of worms right there. Whatever kind of nonsense went on, we'll get in front of the judge at that point. And that is certainly maybe the first way, or the first big way that this case could really turn around.
Mm-hmm. And just so everyone knows, the judge in this case is Judge Louise Flanagan, a G.W. Bush appointee.
All right.
So that's the judge who's going to look at these motions and make determinations about what should be looked at in camera, if anything, if grand jury materials should be handed over, whether there's vindictive or selective prosecution, whether there's a failure to state a claim, or a crime, or, a true threat. And she'll decide whether that's a matter of law or something for fact finders like jurors to decide. That's all going to be up to her in these pretrial motion stages.
Yep.
All right. Well, we've got a couple of updates on vandals in the Capitol. They're everywhere. They're vandalizing everything. We've got a couple of cases with Judge Jeanine Pirro, and we have an update on Davy Hearn, somebody named Ferris, and we're going to talk about that after the break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would you know my name?
Welcome back. Okay, we have a couple of updates on Donald Trump's war on vandals in the District of Columbia. First, the government is asking the court to dismiss the indictment against Davy Hearn without prejudice, so they can possibly bring the charges again down the road. Because you never know when your job might be in trouble. If you're, a box of wine type of gal, you need to bring that case back just to pump a little life back into your current position. Okay, so they write, at the outset, it should be noted that the government sought this indictment in good faith after the Department of Interior provided evidence, albeit incomplete, that there was vandalism to the reflecting pool. However, based on newly received Brady materials from DOI, the government could not sustain its burden that the defendant's actions caused further damage to the liner beyond the condition that Bay 4 was already in. Accordingly, consistent with both its evidence, its burden of proof, and its ethical obligations, the government was required to move to dismiss the case pursuant to Rule 48. This, however, does not suggest that there was no vandalism to other areas of the reflecting pool. Davy Hearn, you scamp, you're violating all over the place that we have no evidence of.
So get this, they say at the time the indictment was returned, the USAO DC, that's the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., was not aware of or in possession of any of the extensive documentation of installation issues compiled by DOI from the start of this installation process. And unbeknown to USAO DC at the time, I usually say unbeknownst, but unbeknown, was the June 11th, 2026 email from the National Park Service engineer documenting peeling of the lining within days after the completion of its installation. That was more than a week before they arrested Hearn. Should the case be represented to a new grand jury based on newly discovered evidence, any re-indictment of the case wouldn't constitute harassment. Rather, it would be a prosecution supported by probable cause.
How is that possibly unbeknown?
Mm-mm.
Like literally the entire world known that stuff was peeling off 5 minutes after it peeled off.
Yeah,
like
we every be known. I don't know where she is unbeknown.
Every camera in DC was focused on that reflecting pool for a while, but okay. So as Adam Klossfeld put it, prosecutors say that the, quote, late-breaking documents they received sabotaged their ability to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, but also absurdly claim that newly discovered evidence could rehabilitate the claims later. I mean, yeah.
That's what they're saying. That's what Pirro is saying.
Next up, we have a story from NBC. A judge on Monday ordered the release of a Kentucky woman who was accused of, you heard it, vandalism at the World War II Memorial in Washington last week, court records show. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, the top federal prosecutor in Washington, criticized the order that led to the release of the woman, Melissa Farris, age 41, who was taken into custody last week and charged with 2 felony counts.
Yep. Now, this vandal actually did the vandalizing.
Okay.
Court documents showed Farris agreed to conditions of her release, including surrendering her passport and not leaving the continental United States unless approved by the court. But the Justice Department urged a reconsideration of the release order and said the woman was a risk of flight and that Farris should be held in pretrial detention. The only problem is Farris turned herself in within hours of the vandalism. And that is an insurmountable thing to try to say they are a serious flight risk.
Yeah.
The World War II memorial was vandalized with bubbly soap. So she poured soap in the thing. And she did a little graffiti last Thursday. The fountain bubbled over with suds, and the words, "Clean hands, dirty money," were painted on one surface, splattering the area with red and green paint. So here's Jeanine Pirro for...
Thank you, it's what they say. Thank you, each and every day. Don't believe your lying eyes. Oh. Well, alright. Politicians are the best at even changing all the facts. It's designed for us to limit thought. Thank you, it's what they say. Thank you, each and every day. Don't believe your lying eyes.
Arguing in court that against the Bail Reform Act, that this woman should be held in pretrial detention for spray painting and putting bubbles in a fountain. Correct me if I'm wrong, but pretrial detention is reserved for people who are actual flight risks, like, I don't know, Andrew Tate or, something like that. Somebody with a bunch of passports and the means to travel, because they were like, she was looking at bus tickets to Virginia, which is 5 minutes away. She was looking on her phone on how to get to Toledo because that's where her parents live.
Yeah.
And that's not a flight risk. And then if you can't establish a flight risk, it has to be because they're a violent criminal or they're a danger to the community or something like that. And so for Jeanine Pirro to be in there arguing vociferously for pretrial detention for a vandal, it's pretty autocratic stuff.
It's not going to work either. As you put it, there's 2 factors for pretrial detention. It's risk of flight and danger to the community. And they're both kind of considered at the same time. So you could theoretically have no risk of flight. Like you don't even have a passport, you got no money, whatever, but you're so dangerous that alone can get you detained. And the opposite is also possible. Usually it's a mixture of the two. Here, you can't just assume that there is a risk of flight simply because someone's been charged. There has to be these other factors that lead to it, like they've fled before and they have their own private jet and 16 passports or whatever. Here, she completely obliterates those presumptions by turning herself in. They probably had no idea who she was, right? Mm-hmm. There's no indication from the reporting I've read that they had they were closing in on her or some sort of manhunt for the bubble vandal. So without her voluntarily showing up and saying, I did it, here's my soap bottle, this case doesn't even get off the ground. But
yeah, and Pirro's like, we have videos she posted on social media. We know she did this. And the judge is like, yeah, everybody knows she did it. She turned herself in.
How's that helping your flight?
So the judge was like, look, go back to Ohio, report to the Northern District there, and stay with your family. And that's the end.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
and Pirro's freaking out about it.
Come on. She's got to freak out over it. She let the other vandal get away, that dastardly Davy Hearn, and it almost cost her a job. So she's bringing the hammer down.
She specifically, has to freak out about it. Nobody else would. Everyone would be like, yeah, please.
It's like, those bubbles are slippery.
We should definitely use taxpayer dollars to house this violent criminal flight risk in our whatever. Just ridiculous. I'll jail anybody. I don't care.
I'll bring all the bubbles. Does somebody say bubbly? Oh my God.
Maybe it was an homage to Lindsey Graham and his bubble wand. You don't know.
Do you know what a gift you've just given to our listeners by including this story in today's? Because they mourn the day that there are no more Jeanine Pirro stories. I get every week. The questions include just desperate pleas to keep reporting on Jeanine Pirro even after she gets fired.
Oh.
So I feel like we've hit the mark today.
Don't worry, everyone. There will always be Jeanine Pirro. It'll come out here and there. All right, we've got. This whole show, to be fair, has kind of been hit me in the head with a bat, but we have the actual hit me in the head with a bat segment after this last break. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. It's time to hit me in the head with a bat.
Hit me in the head with a bat. Hit me in the head with a bat. Hit me in the head with a bat.
Today's installment is related to the Cities Church case.
Hit me in the head with a bat.
This is the one with Don Lemon and Georgia Fort and several other people who were indicted in Minnesota for protesting or covering protests as journalists in the Cities Church in Minnesota. And our story today comes from MPR. That's Minnesota Public Radio.
Okay.
A U.S. district judge has ordered the federal government to turn over all grand jury materials for her review in the case of 38 people facing conspiracy charges for the anti-ICE protest at St. Paul Church in January. Independent journalists, including former CNN anchor Don Lemon and Twin Cities local Georgia Fort, are charged with conspiracy. Cities Church was targeted by protesters on January 18th because the church's pastor, David Easterwood, helped lead the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement field office in St. Paul during the government's surge into Minnesota this winter.
Defendants had argued it was likely the federal government grossly misrepresented the facts and misstated the law to grand jurors in order to secure an indictment. Grand jury proceedings are generally secret, but the Justice Department's actions have been more scrutinized since a federal judge in Chicago uncovered prosecutorial misconduct in a case involving anti-ICE activists, which led to charges being dropped.
Yeah, that's the Broadview 6 case with Kat Abou-Ghazaleh and the rest.
Yep. Defendants in the church conspiracy case challenged a June ruling by U.S. Magistrate Judge Douglas Miko that denied a motion to disclose all grand jury materials involved in the indictments. Miko ruled in July that he'll look at some grand jury materials in camera to decide whether prosecutors misled jurors, but he limited what would be examined.
All right, so Miko was a magistrate judge.
That's right.
But Judge Laura Provenzino wrote in an order, she's the district judge, wrote in an order released Tuesday that the court will examine all grand jury materials in order to rule on the defendant's objections to Miko's denial. She'll be looking at more materials than Miko has agreed to examine. Provenzino will examine prosecutors' presentation to grand jurors at hearings in January and February. She said in the order that the materials should also include any introductions, legal instructions, witness testimony, and answers to questions by jurors. And I'm assuming she's doing this to head DOJ off at the pass, who in the past has withheld some of those grand jury documents, like introductions and legal instructions. Well, you didn't specifically ask for those, Your Honor. So she's listed everything here. Provenzino has set a deadline of August 25th for the government to send her the grand jury materials. That's 2 days from now, right?
Wow.
Tuesday.
Yeah. And it's all means all, right? Good for her.
She overruled the magistrate judge here. And so Don Lemon et al. Filed a motion to the district judge to say, we object to the magistrate judge's narrowing or, of what should be looked at. And I think that that's good because there were several defects in what we know that was presented to the grand jury and what was in the indictment and then what was removed from the criminal complaint, including that Lemon and Georgia Fort were chanting that, and then that turned out to be false after video evidence was proven. So they are now rightfully saying, what did you tell the grand jury? How is this a conspiracy? And this district judge has agreed with Lemon et al. And is going to examine everything. And she was, again, very clear. You have to include the introductions. You have to include the description of the law. You have to include all these things and hand it all over by this coming Tuesday.
Nice. The tide continues to turn.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So listener questions. It's time for I think we actually have a little extra time for listener questions today. So maybe we could take one or two. And if you have a question, there's a link in the show notes that you could click on and that'll take you to a form where you can submit your questions to us. Andy, what do we have this week for questions?
What we have this